Picture this. You're out at a fancy bar on a Friday night, enjoying a perfectly mixed, expensive cocktail. It's clean, it's refreshing, and it tastes amazing. Now, let's travel backward in time to an era where life absolutely, undeniably sucked. You live in a freezing cave, you fight giant predators with a sharp stick, and your average life expectancy is about Thursday afternoon. But then, one random afternoon, you stumble across an old stone bowl that's been left sitting out in the pouring rain for weeks. It's full of wild berries that have turned into a slimy, bubbling sludge. It smells foul. It looks even worse. There is a weird, fuzzy layer forming on top of it. A sensible person would run away, but you are a starving, desperate prehistoric human. Food is food, and your stomach is growling. So, you shrug your shoulders and chug the entire bowl of rotten fruit slime. 10 minutes later, your worries disappear. The cold cave suddenly feels warm. You try to hug a saber-toothed tiger because it looks soft, and your legs completely stop working. Congratulations. You have just accidentally discovered alcohol, and you are about to experience the world's very first hangover. For over 200,000 years, human beings lived as nomadic hunter-gatherers. We walked constantly, followed the game animal migrations, and picked wild plants. It was a healthy lifestyle, but it was absolutely exhausting. Then, around 10,000 years ago, everything suddenly changed. Humans decided to stop running around and settle down to farm grains like barley. Standard history textbooks will tell you that we did this for security. They claim our ancestors wanted a stable food supply, leading to the invention of bread. But modern archaeological evidence suggests that those history textbooks are completely lying to you. A growing group of respected scientists and historians actually believe humanity did not build civilization to secure food. We built it because we wanted to get buzzed. Think about the reality of early agriculture. The earliest forms of bread were absolutely terrible. They were rock hard, unrisen, dry cakes that tasted like literal dirt and sawdust. Nobody would give up a free life of hunting just to eat clay bread. But things get interesting when you look at how grain was stored. Ancient pots weren't airtight. Rainwater would easily leak into the storage jars, turning the raw grain into a damp, warm, stagnant porridge. And floating through the air of every ancient settlement was a magical, invisible organism, wild yeast. Yeast is a single-celled fungus. When it lands in a warm, wet bowl of grain, it starts eating the sugars. And when yeast digests sugar, it expels two things: carbon dioxide bubbles and ethanol, literal alcohol. So, a primitive farmer walks over to his storage jar, expecting to grab some dry flour, but instead finds a strange, fizzy, sour-smelling soup. Being an ancient human who hates wasting resources, he doesn't throw it out. He drinks the cloudy liquid. Suddenly, the brutal, mind-numbing reality of pulling weeds under the hot sun doesn't feel so bad. He feels warm, completely relaxed, and incredibly happy. He runs to the rest of the tribe and screams, "Drop everything! We need to stop planting food and grow 10 times more barley immediately!" And just like that, civilization took off. Agriculture scaled up rapidly, not because we were hungry, but because we needed to mass produce the magical happy juice. As human society advanced into the Bronze Age, the art of accidental fermentation turned into a massive, organized industry. Welcome to ancient Mesopotamia. In the empires of Sumer and Babylon, beer wasn't just a casual weekend treat. It was woven into the legal, religious, and economic fabric of the entire civilization. In fact, the oldest written beer recipe in human existence was actually recorded as a religious hymn dedicated to Ninkasi, the goddess of brewing. But before you go romanticizing the ancient bars of Babylon, let's get one thing straight. You would absolutely vomit if someone handed you a pint of their brew. They didn't have stainless steel filters, pasteurization, or basic sanitation. Their beer was a thick, lukewarm, cloudy porridge. It was so densely packed with floating debris that it looked more like liquid breadcrumbs. If you tried to tilt the mug back and drink it normally, you would literally choke on solid grain stalks and swallow dead insects. To solve this incredibly gross problem, the Babylonians had to get creative. And in doing so, they invented one of the most common fast food items, the drinking straw. High society Babylonians used ultra-luxurious, 4-foot-long straws crafted from gold, while commoners used simple, hollow reeds picked from the riverbank. Entire families would sit around a massive communal jar, insert their long straws to the very bottom to draw out the clean liquid, completely bypassing the nasty layer of debris floating at the top. It was a beautiful, heartwarming family bonding experience, revolving around a bucket of alcoholic oatmeal. In fact, beer was considered such a fundamental part of daily survival, it became the literal currency of the ancient world. Average laborers building grand temples were paid up to 4 liters of chunky beer per day as their actual salary. Even high-ranking government officials received a daily beer allowance. Imagine putting in a hard 40-hour work week at your modern job, and instead of a paycheck, your boss hands you a literal wheelbarrow full of warm, sour porridge beer. While the Babylonians were content sucking down their liquid bread, a new superpower emerged across the Mediterranean that looked at beer with absolute disgust. Welcome to ancient Rome. To a sophisticated Roman citizen, beer was a repulsive, low-class drink fit only for dirty, unwashed barbarians in the northern forests. True civilization required wine. But don't mistake Roman wine for a smooth bottle of modern Cabernet. Roman wine was a thick, highly concentrated, intensely bitter, syrupy liquid. It had a massive alcohol percentage. Drinking Roman wine straight from the barrel was considered a sign of extreme madness and severe, unrefined, destructive alcoholism. To make it drinkable, every tavern had to heavily dilute it. They mixed the thick wine paste with fresh water and seawater to add salt. They added honey and spices to cut the intense bitterness. But their favorite secret ingredient to make cheap wine taste premium was a chemical that modern society spends billions of dollars trying to ban. Roman winemakers discovered that boiling unfermented grape juice inside pure lead pots created an incredibly sweet, artificial syrup called defrutum. They poured this toxic lead sugar solution directly into their wine barrels, unknowingly causing widespread neurological damage across their entire ruling class. But lead poisoning wasn't the only issue at a high society Roman party. Because these lavish banquets regularly lasted for 12 straight hours, the guests ran into a major anatomical limitation: stomach capacity. To bypass the physical limits of the human body, wealthy Romans utilized a special technique. They would feast and drink until they were full, walk into an adjacent room, and use a feather to force themselves to vomit. Once their stomach was completely emptied out, they would casually stroll right back to the dinner table, sit down, and start the entire eating and drinking process all over again. Now, popular myth calls these rooms vomitoriums. In reality, that word just referred to the massive exit hallways of a stadium. But the disgusting practice of purging during a dinner party? That part was 100% real. They literally engineered a way to hack their own digestive system just so they could maximize the amount of time they spent chugging toxic salt water. By this point, you might think that chasing an alcohol buzz is a unique sign of human flaw and modern societal madness. But science has proven that we didn't actually invent getting drunk. Nature has been throwing wild, unhinged parties for millions of years. In the wilderness of Africa, when the sugary fruit of the marula tree drops to the ground, it bakes under the intense sun and ferments completely naturally. The local wildlife knows exactly what happens when these fruits sit out. Baboons and monkeys will actively skip fresh food sources just to gorge themselves on the rotten, alcoholic fruit. Even massive elephants get in on the action. They will consume hundreds of pounds of fermented marula fruit in a single session. This results in giant, multi-ton mammals stumbling blindly across the savanna and accidentally knocking over trees because their legs can no longer walk straight. Meanwhile, in the colder climate of Sweden, a completely different animal handles the exact same seasonal indulgence, the wild moose. In the autumn, apples fall to the ground and ferment rapidly in the wet grass. Wild moose will actively roam into residential backyards, eat the fermented apples by the dozen, and get absolutely blasted. Every single year, Swedish police have to respond to emergency calls about aggressive, wasted moose who have gotten themselves tangled up in backyard trees or are terrorizing local suburban homeowners because they had one too many cider apples. Our deep-seated craving for ethanol isn't a modern lifestyle choice. It is a deeply rooted evolutionary trait that we share with the entire animal kingdom. So, the next time you enjoy a cold, refreshing drink on a weekend evening, take a brief moment to look back through history and thank your ancestors. Thank that brave, starving caveman who looked into a bucket of bubbling, putrid rain sludge, shrugged his shoulders, and decided to drink it anyway. Which of these ancient drinking habits sounds the absolute worst to you? The chunky Babylonian straw soup or the toxic Roman lead wine?